Hello, this is Sophie Lawson from sophielawson.com, and this is episode 244 of the Sophie Art Podcast, which is a little podcast I do about the art and things with me co-host lilDENNiS. lilDENNiS is with us today, and it's time for another look at the last month of art class. So lilDENNiS can get us into this one. So we've had our little kitty kisses. lilDENNiS and Kitty are going to sit down. And before we get into this one, which is for the month of November, it is actually Christmas. Well, it's not Christmas, it's Christmas month. So today is the day of recording this podcast is the 1st of December. So I'm going to open my little advent calendar. And we've got a cup. And we've got the little chocolate is, hey, it's a little gingerbread man. Yeah. Oh, that's nice. For me, the best thing about Christmas is chocolate. And what I like about advent calendars is you get a little bit of chocolate each day, and it's just enough to be excited. But for this one, well, one of the things I wanted to talk about on this one is, I wanted to talk about if you don't feel like you want to do something, should you do it or should you not do it? I'll talk about it a bit later, but the stuff on this one is going to be all about a lot of different things this month, actually. So outside, what I do is on a Saturday I go out painting and stuff, but one of these is actually going to be about a still life. I've got a couple little quick sketches, and then this month, well, for November, I did a lot of people sketching, so I'm going to talk about that as well. But first, we'll get into the art class, and I believe there was only I only went to 2 sessions this month. Yeah, so the first one was on the 9th of November, and what we did here was we had a model posing for us, a beautiful model, and once again what we've got is, we've got this thing where the short poses are way more sexy than the long ones. And I always think to myself, I think I would rather have 2 hours of short poses rather than one big long one. Actually, I should say that. I might say to do that, because I get more fun out of these short ones. That's what I'm thinking. So we did 2 little short ones. The first one, she had a knee over a leg over a leg, and I love that. I've always loved that, because what you get like there's a sexy line where the leg is like, the top leg is sitting on top of the bottom leg. There's a very sexy curvy line right along there, and you always get the straight line as well, the leg. And then the bum as well, because when you cross your legs, it pushes the bum out. You get like more of a shape of the bum. So that was a nice one. The next one, she was sitting down. Oh, you can also, if you go onto YouTube at youtube.com/Sophie Lawson, you can also see these little sketches. But the next one, she was quite sort of gently posing again. But what I liked about this one was the way her foot was sort of resting on the floor. It was like there was a nice flow to her whole body on this one. And then we went into the long pose. So the long pose, she was actually lying down. Now the thing is, again, what I find hard with this is when they're lying down, I find it very hard to judge how big the body is compared with the legs. So I started off doing a little quick sketchy thing, and I did the legs way too short. So, but what I do is I always do a little quick sketch first now, because it helps me find where to place the drawing on the paper. So what I did was I pushed it over a little bit. Yeah, it was a bum. What had happened was I'd made her body a bit too long. But what I liked about this model was her hair. Again, her hair was very sexy. So I did the little quick sketch, and then I went into the finished one, which I did with my pencils. And again, what I liked about this one was she was sitting on the background was very dark, and it was actually like making her body pop. Yeah, there was a lot of nice lighting going on this night. And again, I liked her hair as well. So recently at art class, I've been playing around with this big fat, it's a 5.2 inch, I think, no, a 5.2 6B pencil, and it's like really thick, but it's really helping me sort of let go, and it also helps me speed up as well, because I can get through a drawing a lot quicker now, instead of using the little 0.5 pencils. But what I did on this one was right at the end I put some lines in with the 0.5 pencil on the hair to get a little bit of the detail in. I think this was the one, this happened, the last two sessions this happened, where, because what happens is at half time we have a little break and the model has a drink and a rest. And when she come back, she was ever so slightly out of position, and I believe it was her hand that was out of position. So what happens is you end up sort of trying to draw the pose the way it was before the break. So you're sort of like drawing what you see, but also you're sort of making it up as well. But it's a good thing, because it's like, what it does is, because you're trying to draw stuff that is no longer in front of you, it makes you understand you find out whether you understand how the lighting's working, because you've got to sort of do it from your head. There are some beautiful lights and darks on this one though. And then, so that was the end of that sketchbook. I missed a session because I was on holiday, and I'm really upset that I missed it, because what they did was, they were basically, it was a workshop where they were looking at a painting, a photo, and they had to basically create a drawing or a painting of their own in the style of that artist. And one of them was The Simpsons. So that's what I was going to do, because what you would have done was looked at a photo of The Simpsons, and you would have had to have created your own character in the style of The Simpsons. So that would have been brilliant. But what I've done is I've actually left a page in my sketchbook, and I'm actually going to do it on that. So for next month I will have a picture of it's going to be a character it's a character that I've made up that should look like it fits into the world of The Simpsons. So that'll be on next month's art class thingy. But the next one was for the 23rd of November, which was last week. And again, we had another model doing poses. I believe it was the same model. I think it was. She's called Freda. And the thing is with this model is, she can just sit down and pose. She doesn't need to be like told how to pose. You can tell that she feels the pose, which is beautiful. So the first one, she was sitting down. Again, her bum was being pushed out. But what I loved about this one was, you know that thing where one shoulder's higher than the other one? What it does is I find that very, I suppose, sexy when you get one shoulder pushed up. Because what it also does is it creates lots of nice shapes around the entire body, because you sort of see how you see how the angle of the shoulders affects the rest of the body. And she also had her arms put down. For me, this was very much like a sort of an anime character pose. There's a cute little pose. Oh, and then she did another one. Yeah, this was quite an interesting one actually. This one, she was sitting on the chaise longue, or with her legs right out, but she was actually turned facing the wall. So most of us had all we saw was the back of her. Very rarely do you get that, and I find this very interesting. So what I found interesting on this one was you could really see her sort of her spine. You could see how her spine was curving, and again, I suppose what's happening is I'm starting to realise how, like, when the top of the body is sort of angled, it changes everything else. So you sort of see how all parts of the body are connected to each other. What I also liked was one of her arms was like sort of like cuddling the what's it called? The arm of the chaise longue, and it was like wrapping around. But what I like about this one is I've sort of simplified everything into a single lines. So this one's quite a nice simple one as well. And then we moved into the final one, which again, she was lying down on the sofa on the chaise longue. She had one leg right out and another one bent. Now I feel like this pose was a little bit sort of, well, what was happening was in the second half she actually had to keep moving. So I feel like she must have had cramp or something, which I'm not surprised, because it looked like, well, her leg was like sort of bent and stuff. But I did a little quick sketchy thing, and then I did the final one. I think the thing I'm most proud about with this one is sort of capturing the depth of one of her legs. Like because what she did was she had her leg was outstretched. One of her legs was stretched right out, but it was ever so slightly not. So it was sort of like slightly bent in, which created a little bit of foreshortening. And I feel like I captured that quite nicely. Which is quite cool. Also got her eyes in, because she was like sleeping. She had her eyes shut. She looked very peaceful in this one. And again, what was nice about this one was the shadows. So what I did on this one was I just created loads of... What I've started doing is I've started focusing on the shadow shapes. What's especially good is because at the moment we're in the season of darkness at night time. What happens now is when you get to art class, it's dark. So for the rest of the year so far, what's happened is the first half of the session has been sort of dusk, and then the second half, especially the last 30 minutes, it would get very dark, and all of a sudden you get all the light shapes and shadow shapes and things. But now we're getting that all the time because it's dark all the time. So I love this, and I love picking out the lights and stuff. It's one of my favourite things. It's actually like pulling out the highlights. I just enjoy doing that. But this one, the thing I've done wrong with this one is her body's a bit too long. And again, what happened here was she slightly moved. So for the second half, she was ever so slightly moved, and it, like I said, a slight little change in a slight little. It was probably like about a 5-degree angle that she changed. It totally transformed all the shadow shapes, and also it changed the sort of what it was her breast. You couldn't really see her top breast, so you sort of had to make it up from the shading around it. But what happened was, because she ever so slightly moved, what happened was her top breast, it basically almost like disappeared. So in the first half you could see like a pyramid shape, But in the second half, that had gone. It was almost like straight. But I wanted to keep the pyramid shape because I thought the shape of her breast, it created like a nice flow. Whereas if it was flat, it just lost a lot of feeling. So I wanted to keep it, but I couldn't see what the shadows were doing. So again, I had to sort of make that up. But this was a nice one. And again, I did that thing where right at the end, I put some details in with her hair with the 0.5 pencil. That was a nice one. And then right at the very end, again, I played around with that Pentel sign pen. It's a Pentel sign pen, which is like a belt tip pen really, but it's brilliant for shading and stuff. And what I was doing was I was just basically like looking at parts of her body and trying to turn all of the shadows into simple shapes, like single shapes. It's fun. So that's it for art class. And I also didn't go yesterday, which is one of the things I wanted to talk about, is if you're going to go to art class or something and you suddenly think to yourself, if you don't feel like you want to go, do you think you should listen to that feeling and not go? Because maybe you're just not feeling it. And because sometimes I've done things when I've not been feeling it, and my heart hasn't been in it, and it sort of showed. But sometimes I've had that feeling of not feeling it. I've gone anyway, and it's been the best. It's been like the best thing I've ever done. I remember when I was at uni, when we used to go out clubbing and stuff. Sometimes you'd be so excited for the night, and it would turn out to be rubbish. And then sometimes you didn't want to go out. You went out, and it was the best night ever. So it's a bit strange that. But well, for yesterday I decided to stay in because I've been feeling quite a lot tired lately. So I just wanted to have a little bit of a rest. But the other thing I've been doing, every Saturday morning, I've been going out doing what are they called, like plein air paintings and things. They're little sketches really. So the first one, what happened was it was peeing down with rain. So I thought, well, I can't really sit outside in this. So what I did on the way home, I just picked up a load of bits and bobs, like leaves, trees, branches. Some of them were covered in like moss. And also, because what was happening was we were going into the winter, you had a nice range of coloured leaves, green ones, orange, brown. Also, this was about Halloween time, so there was actually, I think this might have been the day after Halloween or something. So there was a pumpkin. Somebody had like left a the pumpkin lid on the floor. So I brought that home as well because I thought that orange would be nice. And there's also these little, I don't know what they are, but they're a little bit like sort of conker type things. They weren't conkers though. They had like furry skins. They were like nuts with furriness on them. So again, I thought they would be nice, a nice different texture. But what happened here was, I thought how brilliant it would be to have all this stuff. And then I also had some stones because they were grey. And some little berries as well, because I thought the red berries would pop. But what happened was I soon realised you can have too much stuff. And what I thought to myself was, still lifes are better when you've got less stuff. So I learnt a really good lesson here. I didn't think this was a very good painting when I did this, but looking at it now, I sort of like it a little bit more than I did at the time. But I did another one where I only picked 4 things. I had a little bit of a branch which had moss on it, one of those like furry nut things, some red berries and a green leaf. I think I maybe should have gone with an orange leaf because what happened was the green leaf blends in with the green on the moss on the, what's it called, the twig. So you sort of lose the thing there. But the best thing for me on this was, it wasn't actually the painting, it was putting the still life together. I really enjoyed putting the still life together more than actually painting. So in other words, I enjoyed designing and composing the little still lifes. I don't feel like I did a very good job of it, but I could see that I was enjoying it, and I felt to myself, if I keep doing this, I feel like it would be, well, the more you do it, the better you would get at it. Also, there was these little white things. They were weird. They were like white berries or something. And I felt to myself, it looked like a little alien was going to pop out of them. They reminded me of like alien eggs or something. So I'm definitely going to be doing more still lifes in December, especially now that it's cold. It's better to sort of, I thought to myself, if you can't do nature outside, bring the nature inside. So I'm actually going to start doing, what I'm going to do for December is probably do mixed people sketching up with still lifes, because I enjoy doing that. And then the next one, I did a very quick sketch outside with some like a black fine liner and very light watercolour. So what I liked about this one was, what happened was, me and my mum went down the shop, and on the way home I saw this really nice shape. So what happened was, like, the road was like, well, it's quite hard to explain it really, but the background of the houses were on like a curve, but what happened was, right in front of me was like a curved pavement, and the angle that I was at, it's almost like the buildings are curving in with the pavement, so you get this nice like reverse S shape. And like there was lots of nice shapes going on here. One of the things I find really hard is doing light watercolours. So I'm trying to get better at that. And the other thing was, there was a car here which was actually grey with a hint of red on it. But what I did was, when I did my painting, I made the whole car red, because I thought that would make, if it was red, it makes the car pop, which is nice. And also I put the traffic lights in. Again, like a little sprinkling of colour. I enjoyed this one. This is another one of those ones where every so often what happens is, you go through your sketchbook and you sort of feel like you're going through a photo album. So I feel like in 10-20 years time I'll look back at this and I'll remember me and my mum sitting on this little wall, because my mum was sitting with me as I was sketching, which normally it's me on my own, but it was quite interesting actually, sitting with my mum. So I enjoyed that one. And then what I did after that was, I thought to myself, I haven't done people sketching for a long time. Also, I wanted to, because I get very cold hands, so I wanted to keep my gloves on. So I thought, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to actually sit in town after work, and I'm going to just sketch people walking around. So for me, this is one of my favourite things to do, and I haven't done it for about, well, at least a year. I used to do this all the time, every single day. I'd go in town and sketch people. So a little tip, if you want to people sketching without sort of feeling like you're sort of watching people or something, sit in front of a cash point. And what happens is, when people go into the cash machine, you can actually like sketch them from behind. So most of these sketches are from people from behind. But what I've noticed is, I love drawing the shape of hoods and caps and handbags. Yeah. And also the other thing is, if you're sketching somebody who's walking, it's that thing again where you're trying to sort of, you're sketching them. When you first see them, you start sketching them, and because they start moving, you're trying to sort of sketch them. You're looking at them and seeing what they're wearing and how they're moving. You're trying to capture them, but you've also got to try and keep it in the perspective that it was when you started sketching it. So you're doing that thing where you are drawing what you see, but you're making it up as well. This is why I think this is a really cool skill to practice. I've drawn this bloke here wearing a cap, but the way I've drawn his face, he looks like a little, like a bear or something. I've actually seen characters in Character Design Quarterly magazine. There's an artist who draws people like that. They're like little, they look like little mice or something. That's quite weird. I didn't even realise I'd done that. Yeah, and what I also like doing is trying to keep it to 3 tones, like the white tone, a dark and a light. And the more I got into this, the more I started bringing those tones in. So what I like to do is I like to make the handbags dark, and because what I think is it makes the handbag pop, but it also I just love it. I love the shape of handbags and like bags when people are walking around. There was also a bloke riding a bicycle, and what was happening was he was like bombing down the pavement, and the wind was blowing up his jacket, so it looked like he had, it looked a bit like Superman's cape or something. That was cool, that was. I enjoyed that one. Yeah, I like sketching people wearing big puffy jackets as well. So what I also like is as you're sketching them, you're sort of thinking to yourself, I wonder where they're going, what they're doing, I wonder what's in their bags or something. Sometimes you see people walking along carrying big boxes, and you sort of think to yourself, I wonder what's in them. Sometimes you see couples walking around, and you can sort of feel you can feel like the relationship with people by the way they're walking. It's nice, it is. So there was these two old ladies walking along at one point. I like it. There's a bloke here, he's using a cash machine, but he looks a bit like he's doing a sort of a bank job with a gun or something. Yeah, but what I'm noticing is I'm drawn to people wearing hats and big jackets with hoods, and also bags. Somebody with a little dog there as well. Yeah, this is fun, this is. I like, also what it does is it makes you appreciate how different everyone is. You get like fat people, but the thing is, you're looking at them thinking how nice their shapes are. So they've got these really big fat bodies, but there's a niceness about them as well. In a strange way, I find fat people more interesting to draw or sketch because they've got more shapes going on. What I like about thin people is though when they've got clothing on that's flowing around, because then you get the nice shapes of the outfit with the sort of straightness of the body. Yeah, there was one lady, like a girl walked along with this beautiful long hair, and it just made me think of little Sophie, my little character. So she had 2 bags on each arm as well. She looked like like a rock star or something. There was a bloke selling the big issue. He was nice, he was cool as well. Oh yeah, then there was this lady sitting down on the phone. Oh, there was this funny moment as well. There was this bloke, and he was like sort of standing by this tree, but the way he was standing, it looked like he was sort of peeking out behind the tree. It was quite funny, it was. Yeah, there's a big bloke here with a Tesco's bag. So like, I don't know. I feel like when you're sketching these people in this sketchbook, when you're looking at them, you can feel them somehow. And even though they're just tiny little doodly sketchy things, somehow there is the sort of essence of them inside of it. It's very interesting. And then I think, last week when I did it, last Saturday, it started raining as well. But what happens is I've got my music blasting out and I get right into it. But sometimes you're sitting there and there's nobody around. Or sometimes what happens is if I start sketching somebody and I start feeling like, if I start either feeling self-conscious because maybe people are looking at me, or if I start thinking, because sometimes the mind starts saying what you're doing is rubbish. So if that starts happening, what I do is I actually start sketching leaves on the ground or something. Because what it does is it takes my mind away from the thoughts, and instead I can focus on drawing these leaves, and then when I go back to the people, it's like I've emptied my mind. Somebody was smoking. Yeah, little pigeons as well. I love the shapes of pigeons. Yeah, sometimes you start sketching somebody, but like 2 seconds and they've gone. So sometimes sometimes you end up with just like a head and an arm. Because what's happened is the person's moved out of view, gone behind some trees or something, or a crowd of people, and my memory hasn't captured it enough to be able to finish it. That's why I like sketching people by cash machines and things. Yeah, there's this lady sitting down by, I think there's this lady, I think it was the same lady from before. Yeah, I think it was. Because she was sitting there for ages. Which I like. There's this one bloke, yeah. He was very cool, he was. It looked like he was sort of, what happened was, it looked like he was made of, what would you call it? Some sort of like elastic or something. Basically, it looked like his feet were stuck to the ground and somebody pushed him forward and he was like swinging back and forth like boing. But what was brilliant about him was, I turned him into a single line. So all he was a single like curve. And then I put, on top of him, I put his clothes and stuff. That was cool. Also, what's happened is I've been sketching, I think right at the end I started sketching the, like what it is in town, they're knocking down all the trees and stuff. So again, one of the last ones I did was I did like a little scene of, basically what it is there's these like little stone walls which had water running through the middle of it, and it's beautiful, but they're going to knock all that down. So what happened was, what it is these sketchbooks, in 10 years time, some of these places that I've sketched, they might not exist anymore. So again, it's like you're sort of capturing memories or something. So at this point I'd had enough of doing pencils. I wanted to try something different, so I got my brush pen out, and that was I should do that more often really. I only did 1 page of them, but what I like about that is this brush pen I've got, they're only cheap ones, but you can get lots of different textures and like straight lines and fluffy things and everything. So they're really good to play around with. I need to do more of those because they're quite cool. So this was so all of that was 1 week, and then last week I started out playing around with me magic pencil, which has got the red, blue and yellow. So you've got 3 colours in one pencil. So as you do your lines, you get all these different colours. That pencil is brilliant for gesture drawing. Not so much for this though. I didn't enjoy it as much with these people sketching. So I only did 1 of those. And then what I did was, I was listening to a podcast. I was listening to a podcast called Creative Pep Talk. I'll put a link in the description, show notes. But one of the quotes on it, "What you're not saying speaks volumes for you." This artist was talking about how, well, very much like these people sketches really. Because the thing is, you can't capture everything. What you're not saying speaks volumes for you. Yeah, it's not about just what you're sketching, it's what you don't sketch as well. Because she was talking about like the negative shapes and stuff. I just thought it was a cool quote. There's another one later as well. Look, it won't be like this forever. Oh, yeah, this is a graphic novel. There's a graphic novel called It Won't Be Like This Forever. So what happened was, on this podcast, Creative Pep Talk, he was interviewing this artist who created this graphic novel, and it sounds brilliant. It's basically this lady it's like an autobiography graphic novel about her mum and dad splitting up and her dad getting with this lady from, I think it was Egypt. So she was American, and she was talking about like how weird it was to have an Egyptian stepmum who was the same age as her. Yeah, it sounded like a really good book, that one. So what happened here was I started trying to create little these little characters. I was trying to create more texture on them. Yeah, there's a bloke in a wheelchair as well. So again, what happened here was I focused on his body. So I got his like pose, but at some point he moved, because he was in his little scooter, he'd gone. So what I did was I had to try to show that he was on a scooter without being able to see the scooter. So what I did was I just put two little wheels in, and that's it really. But by looking at that, you can see he's sitting in the scooter, which in a strange way, is a little bit like what she's saying. What you're not saying speaks volumes. It's almost like, what's good here is because they were talking about this on the podcast. By putting just one little wheel, I've put one wheel of this scooter in and nothing else. What happens is the person looking at it can fill in the rest of the scooter. Because it's like you're telling the viewer that there's a wheel here. So what happens is they fill in the rest of the scooter. So in a strange way, like an illusion, you see the scooter without the scooter being there. Also, because it's getting into Christmas, there's a big wheel and like a funfair in the middle as well. So I started drawing the funfair. Yeah, and then it started raining. Yeah. So that was it. I had to stop. Play was stopped because of the rain. I think for about 4 or 5 pages it was raining. And what was happening was the drips were starting to sort of smudge things as well. But right at the end it got really bad. So I had to stop. But that was last week. I enjoyed that. Yeah, so for me, because what had happened was I'd started to get a little bit, I don't know if the word is bored, but I'd started to realise I was just doing the same thing every single week when I was going out doing my plein air. So I thought to myself, it's time to start trying different things. So I did a still life, 2 weeks of people sketching, but I'm going to do more of these people sketching. So I think December will be mostly people sketching and a little bit of still life. So, because I want to get better at doing still lifes. Yeah, I want to improve my skills of composition. Because what I realised was it is a lot harder than you think it is to compose things. Because again, what you got to do is, it's not just where you're placing objects, it's like the shapes around the objects as well. So you're sort of like, you're looking at the shape, you're looking at the objects you're placing, but you've also got to look at the shapes around the objects as well. And also you need to pick things with, well, I think it's nice to have things with different textures. So there's a skill of going outside, picking and finding things, which is a bit like a sort of, for me that's a bit like an archaeologist exploring. You're trying to find things, like little things that you think would be good for composition. And then the other thing is, because also you've got to look about you're looking at like things with different shapes and different colours. There's loads of stuff going on there. You got that. You've then got to compose it, and then you've got to draw it and paint it. So there's like 3 sort of skills that you're improving just by doing the still life, which I think is brilliant. And then with the people sketching, you sort of, for me, what I'm learning here is I'm learning observational skills. I'm also learning the skill of trying to put things into my memory so that I can draw them when I can't see it, which that's really hard. And then you've also got the skill of, for me, it's the skill of overcoming like social anxiety type things, because it is still quite sort of, there are moments where it feels too much sort of like anxiety. But the thing I've noticed is if I just keep drawing, you just get through it. It's weird. It would have been very easy, I think, to have let the mind stop me doing this. But that's why I like playing music as well, because I can just focus on the music, get lost in the music. There's another thing as well that I've noticed. Last week it was freezing cold it was. But while I was here sketching, I wasn't cold at all. I didn't feel the coldness at all. And I sat there for about an hour. I didn't feel cold. As soon as I stopped drawing, I felt really cold. And the thing is, it reminded me of when I used to go out posing for photos. In the moment, it's almost like when you're lost in the moment, you can't feel cold. It's almost like you lose your senses. And just thinking about it now, that sounds very much like these monks. These monks who like walk through fire and all that sort of thing. Maybe what they've done is they've taken their mind. Maybe they've somehow taken their mind out of their body or something, so they can't feel the fire. Because the thing is, I felt like I could have sat in the coldness for 20 hours and I wouldn't feel cold at all. But the thing is, I was cold. I must have been cold, but somehow I wasn't. So what that's saying to me is, you're actually only cold if your mind says you're cold. You see what I mean? It reminds me of something else as well, because I've just watched that TV show 1899. I started looking into the Titanic and stuff, and I was watching this video about the Titanic. It's quite funny. There was a video on YouTube where somebody had recreated the Titanic with Lego. If I can find it, I'll put a link in the show notes and things. But it made me look into the Titanic, and what it said was the only person who survived the Titanic, who wasn't in a lifeboat, was a chef who had basically, what he'd done was, as it was sinking, he got drunk. In other words, he just downed loads of alcohol. But what happened was, he was so drunk he couldn't feel the coldness of the water, so he survived. Whereas everyone else who was in the water, they felt the coldness and they died. So what I'm saying is, again, that bloke must have been cold, and yet he wasn't cold because he didn't feel it. So it's almost like, that's almost like showing you that the mind is in control of everything, like your senses. Yeah. So again, like it makes me think of Wim Hof as well. It is mind over matter, isn't it? That's, for me, that's quite amazing, that is. So it makes me think, I wonder if you could be, say, set on fire and not feel the fire. I could go anywhere, that. But that's the thing, that's what I love about this. It's not just like art skills and stuff. There's lots of mental stuff going on as well. Like, you're constantly learning, I think. But lilDENNiS has said it's game over, sunshine. Boing! So I hope you enjoyed that. And all that's left is this week's little inspirational quote. And I don't know what it's going to be, but it's from the book Habit Busting by Pete Cohen, which is it's a book I've talked about before on a previous podcast. And what it is when you go through it, the book is full of quotes in the margins. So what I'm going to do is lilDENNiS is going to pick a page. This one. He wants this one. Oh, look at this, look. How brilliant is this? This week's inspirational quote, lilDENNiS picked this. Men are not prisoners of fate, but only prisoners of their own minds. Franklin Roosevelt. Well, again, this is almost like what I was talking about here. If your mind says you're cold, then you're going to be cold. And if you believe you're cold enough, you could actually die. Whereas if your mind says you're not cold, you actually, in other words, the mind could kill you. Yeah, the mind has the power to actually kill you, which almost makes me think about like the placebo effect. Somebody takes a pill, which is nothing, there's nothing in it, it's just a sugar pill. Somebody says it's a poisonous pill, they can actually die from that. So it's not the pill that killed them, it's the mind. Yeah. It goes the other way as well. You could take a poisonous pill, but if somebody says this is it's a sugar pill, even though you've got poison inside of you, you could survive. So this is what I'm saying. This is why the mind is cool. So this week's little inspirational quote: men are not prisoners of fate, but only prisoners of their own minds. Franklin D. Roosevelt. Father Christmas.